Good morning, good afternoon, and or good evening. I keep saying "and" all the time. This
What's
is not
and?
Dave Kale
Yeah.
welcoming you to the Film
Yeah.
Film Project.
People should enjoy their
And is
entire
good,
days. That's
right?
really the point. Yeah.
Or re-listen to the podcast episode multiple times throughout the day.
Sure. At
There you
different
go. Put
times
it
of
on
day.
loop.
Yeah.
Put it on a loop. Yeah. So this is Trish Lambert. Dave Kale is still on parental leave. Actually, he's now officially
Officially.
consciously on parental leave.
Yes.
Yes. He let us know today that he's on parental leave. You know, he kept saying he'd be back, and now he actually is. So, but he'll hopefully be back in 2-3 episodes from now. So that's good. So season 4 is as Marie called it, the endless season 4. We're on the downhill stretch now.
That's right.
So I'm with Corey Olson, our illustrious co-host, and I'm Trish Lambert, if I didn't say. And we have Marie's live with us. Marie Prosser's with us, our showrunner.
Yes.
Hello, Marie.
Thank you, Marie, for
Hello.
joining us and helping
Thanks
us
for having
out
me on
with
again.
this. Yeah.
Because we knew she'd be typing copious notes if we didn't have her on live. So this is better because this way she can actually talk to us about the stuff. So we're going through sets, right? We're going through locations.
Exactly. Sets and
tonight.
locations.
Awesome.
So this is our post-production stuff is kind of divided into two halves. One, of course, is when we review the script discussions and scripts that have been written, as we've been doing for the last few episodes before this. And now we're looking at some of the other contributions that folks have made. People have been drawing maps, and so we've got visual artwork. We have we have music. We're going to be having a special session with Philip Menzies, the official composer of the Film Project, who is going to be walking us through some of the new music that he's currently creating a YouTube playlist for all of the music that he has composed for season 4. Looking forward to going through that with Philip next week. And then, of course, we will talk about the results of the casting voting to see what lucky actors will discover that they have been cast in film for this year, including, of course, the big reveal of who is going to get to play Glorfindel, which I know everybody's, that's like one of the big questions of this season.
I'm going to have to hold myself back when we have that discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
No, Trish. I think you need to be very vocal when we have that discussion. Let us know exactly what.
Glorfindel and Erethin, both. Don't forget.
That's right.
That's
right.
Another
Erethel,
one of my
yeah,
top
exactly.
faves. Right.
Two of your most favorite. It's funny that you're like all about the Gondolin elves. That's
true, isn't it? Yeah, I never really thought about that. I'll have to figure out if there's something about that. If there's something significant about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so we're though your favorite parts of both of their characters are the things they do outside of
That's true.
Gondolin.
That's
mostly.
true. Yeah, Arethel is like she left Gondolin.
Right.
Is one of the things I like about her.
And then Glorfindel outlives it. Well, sort of.
It. Yeah,
in
right.
a complicated way. Yes and no, I guess. But anyway. Looking forward to looking through everybody's contributions. As we try to sort of visualize more clearly what these the stories that we have been discussing, what they're gonna what they would be looking like here. So especially, the sets and locations are always especially fun, knowing the absolutely unlimited budget that we have here at Film for production, so that we bring in the most wonderful locations for all of these things. So.
Right, and who cares if like 2 adjoining places in Middle Earth are actually like on opposite sides of our globe, right?
Exactly,
we have plenty of money. No problem.
I mean, exactly. Shooting, one single episode that takes place on like 4 different continents in in real world sets, but that's okay because that's how we roll at Film. I mean, come on.
That's right.
It's
our
one of the
GoFundMe
advantages.
is limitless.
That's right. We have deep pockets here at the Film Project. Not to mention, of course, the star-studded cast that we have put together as well. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. No, we are a very modest production, very immodest production, honestly, here at Film. All right, good. So we will get into it. A couple quick announcements, and that is. In my announcements, there we are. Found my announcements. Tax Moot is coming up soon, so we are Text Moot is on Saturday, February 8th at Houston Baptist University. So we're continuing slowly to migrate south in Texas, which is fun. We went from Fort Worth down to Waco and now down to Houston.
We can't really go too much further south.
No,
we could.
We're starting to reach a southerly bound. It is true, on the in the Texas front. But anyway, so that's going to be on February 8th, and of course, you should all come down because our very own Trish Lambert is our keynote speaker, which I'm so excited about.
Oh God, the pressure!
It's gotta be awesome. So anyway, yeah, so that's gonna be great. So come down and join us in Houston on February 8th. Now, the registration is not open yet, but there's a really good reason why registration isn't open yet, and that is because we at Signum University are getting our own custom designed registration system, which we're just finalizing putting into place. We're doing our final tests and everything on it right now. And I'm really excited. We've had this whole thing that has been written up for us. So this is and the very first thing that we're going to be doing with it is Text Moot registration. So as soon as that is ready, within the next couple of days here, we'll be launching the registration. You can see the old registration system. So if you've signed up for any of our moots or anything in the past, it's going to be completely new and so much more streamlined than the old system. You won't need a separate login that you'll probably forget and everything else. It's going to be great. So anyway, that's why we don't have the registration open yet, but we will very soon. So keep an eye out on the Signum website for the registration for that, and also registration for Mythmoot, which is which is at the end of June there, 25th to 28th. That is also opening soon. So that will be, TextMoot will be the first and Mythmoot will be the second thing that is going to be launched on our new registration system. So both of those things will be coming up very soon. All right. So let us get into, that's just the wrong way. Let us get into our sets and visual concepts. So this is for the Noldor encampments in Mithrim. We have some ideas for what, because we're going to be there for several episodes. So we have a map by Harungil, who has been our map, the official cartographer of Silmfilm for some time. And so we have the two different encampments of the Feanorians and the Fingolfinians here, right?
Yes. So the north side of the lake should be the camp of Fingolfin, and the south side of the lake should be Maglor's camp.
Yeah.
And the lake being long ways means that they're quite separated from one another and looking across the water, but not in contact.
Yeah, it is really nice how that works, because you can have them be plainly visible, so you can be staring at each other, but yeah, it's a long walk around to get there. So, by the time you get to the other side, you've had plenty of time for second and third thoughts about your trip over there. Yeah, I really like how that works out there. What are the so I'm seeing one of the details that Harungil is giving here is of an encampment that's right there at the tip, like at the boundary there.
Yeah, he wanted to put watchtowers around the no man's land area to clearly demarcate where one group's territory ended and the other began. So the idea was that they'd be maybe an archer's distance away from one another, and they'd have, rival watchtowers looking at each other for however long this standoff lasts throughout the first episode.
Yeah. Now, so we're envisioning them to be living in tents mostly during this time.
Well, that is a question for you guys to consider. But we decided that the host of Fingolfin coming across doesn't have much in terms of supplies, but they probably do have tents.
Right.
So at what point they transition from temporary structures to permanent structures?
See, I'm thinking that in large part because they don't have much. They would be probably quicker to build than just subsist on what they've got, or with what they've got, right? I guess it depends in part upon how we're envisioning the area, like how densely wooded the area. I mean, how much lumber is readily available. That is, if these are mostly around the lake, meant to be sort of more open plains than tents, I would think, because they're probably not going to. This is not such a long-term project that they're going to go on major logging expeditions to drag things in here.
Right. We were last season. We discussed Mithrin being the Scottish Highlands as a set. So if you think of Scottish Highlands, you don't usually think of lots of woods.
Right. Not forests, really.
Right, right. So there's probably wood available, but not plentiful or readily available. And again, if this is when they first get there, we don't want to show a logging expedition.
No, exactly. But at the same time, I mean, one of the things, of course, that we've been dealing with all through season 4 is the passage of time. And even though we're only here in these encampments for a couple episodes, it's still substantial. It's still years that they're there. So there's definitely time for them to build, and I think they would be motivated to build if they were there for more than a couple months. But then again, if there are no trees, or not that many trees, it would make sense for them to have sort of more elaborate tents, but not necessarily entire wooden structures, and because they're going to prioritize using the wood that's available for their fortifications.
Exactly. So the idea of having wooden barricades of some sort would emphasize that they are not necessarily at war at this point, but on the defensive. Yeah, exactly.
Nick, I agree. Clear cutting doesn't feel super elvish. Yes. And if what would be required for them to build nice wooden houses for all of them to live in would be for them to cut down every tree within 10 miles, is a little hard to imagine them making that particular choice. Rhiannon was saying the same thing about prioritizing walls over houses. So, yeah. So here's a question, and this is slightly transitional into the next slide. Actually, let me just save it until we get to the next slide. One of the factors, though, that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about like the tent cities of the Noldor here and their encampments is, what would the characteristics of that city be? I mean, because this is not just any old tent city. This is a Noldor tent city, right? So like, for instance, Roman camps were very famous for their like absolute regularity, right? Everything being exactly precise and every single Roman encampment being set up in exactly the same way so that, any soldier who walked into any Roman camp anywhere in the world would like know exactly where to find everything. That kind of like order and predictability and like neat rows and everything was the sort of the hallmark of the Roman camp. What is the hallmark of the Noldoran camp? Because I'd think that, things are still going to be kind of fancy, right? Even, they are Noldor. Even so, if there isn't enough timber available for them to build houses for themselves, they're going to be doing something, right? There's going to be some evidence of artistry. It's definitely not going to look like a camp of squatters, right? So how
we didn't want it to be crude. It should be artistic. The question was if you wanted it to look more permanent or if you were okay with the temporary feeling of everything.
I think I'm okay. I'm definitely okay with the temporary feeling. It would feel a little bit if it looked too. So I guess it depends on what you mean by temporary. If by temporary we mean using, non-permanent materials like tent canvas and stuff like that rather than wooden walls, then yes. If we mean temporary in the sense of like, just thrown together because we're only going to be here for a little while, so it doesn't matter. No, I don't think the Noldor would be like that at all. And even if they were staying somewhere only a day, right? So I think that
I think Harangel was thinking more of the Roman style of very structured and organized, which you can see from his layout.
Yes.
He the way he put that together. I know the Noldor love to build with stone, but I don't think they're going to do that here.
Yeah, I don't think so. I wouldn't think that that's. I wouldn't think that that's how they would do things there. Now Rhiannon is suggesting that perhaps the Feanorians would be more organized than Fingolfin's people because they're slightly more militaristic. And also they tended to be doing more exploring and just be out and about more than the followers of Fingolfin. So they'd just be more used to establishing camps, I think she means. Yeah, I would be fine with that. I mean, I wouldn't want... Well, okay, so I guess there are a couple things. I was going to say, I wouldn't want the camp of Fingolfin to look sloppy, necessarily, but I could imagine it being different, right? That is not military neat rows, right? Like what if, and I can see again the some of the details there on Harangel's map seem to suggest this as well. Like all straight lines in the Feanorian camp, whereas like roads can kind of, paths among the tents can kind of, roam and wander more, in Fingolfin's camp. More sort of, curvy streets and less of a rigid plan. Even though, again, it's not going to be sloppy. It's not just going to be thrown together. But in part, that would seem to reflect, remember the difference, one of the different, there are major concept differences between these two camps, right? You've got the one group of almost refugees, right? People who have just barely survived crossing the Helcaraxa who are coming here in order to recover, right? And then you've got the Feanorians who came here in good order, essentially, after having won a battle. Feanor died, but they won the battle. So theirs is much more self-consciously a military encampment. Their whole, entrance into this was a military entrance. I know Fingolfin's was as well. They came marching in and banged on the gates of Angband. Not trying to downplay that, but again, we've got... people who are limping their way from the Helcaraxa and who need to recover. And that's like the spirit in which their camp would have been established, if you see what I mean. So showing some ways in which their camp is a little bit more haphazard. And Nick, I do agree there's somewhat less central command in Fingolfin's camp. Fingolfin's personal leadership is... I think fairly clear, but I see what you mean. There's less clear of a hierarchy than there is in the Feanorians' camp, just because they were, of course, used to all obeying Feanor, who quite insisted upon that. And Nick, I also was thinking about embroidery on the tents. I think that's the kind of, because they're going to be they're there for a long time, right? They're going to be spending their time doing things, and one of the things they're going to be doing, I would have to think, would be the artistic improvement of their living quarters and their camp. I don't think that elves are capable of just, hanging out in squalor indefinitely until they move on to a better place, right? So, Yeah, good. Rhiannon points out that we can show the passage of time in some ways by sort of showing the more plain initial setups and sort of showing those, so when we're, post-rescue of Maedhros later on, in episode 2, and I'm forgetting, are we, episode 3, we're leaving in episode 3, right? The encampments?
Right. Episode 4 is the Noldor throughout Beleriand.
Right, exactly. So we've got 3 different episodes. So we could certainly show the different camps in like slightly increased state of beautification, as we're moving along, and it is one way that we can show. Because I mean, certainly, Nick, coming back to your embroidery suggestion, right? Like, it takes some time to embroider a tent, right? I mean, that doesn't happen overnight. So, a tent which is gorgeously embroidered is going to be a sign of a tent that's been sitting there for quite some time. Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, I like this. I really like that pavilion with the star on the floor there in the top right-hand corner of the slide.
Yeah, I included that picture. It was in a selection of suggestions on how to do tents and encampments, specifically because it's a Feanorian star, and because it speaks to what you were saying of they would decorate their space. So just because it's a tent doesn't mean it's a dirt floor. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of there would probably be enough timber for them to make poles like that, so that they can have a nice spread of ceiling. They're not going to be all in 2-man pup tents in rows or anything like that. It's going to be, they're definitely going to be able to make more than that. This, of course, is another difference between the Feanorians and the people of Fingolfin, is that the Feanorians would be able to have more stuff, like furniture, right? I mean, like, they came over on ships. They were able to bring goods, whereas the people of Fingolfin just had what they could carry, and what they could conveniently bring on sleds and things like that. So they won't have much in the way of furniture and stuff inside their tents, other than what they're building while they're there.
So they'll have like bookshelves made out of wood planks and cinder blocks, right?
Exactly. Well, cinder blocks. I used to dream of having cinder blocks.
Their bookshelves will clearly be made out of the old sleds.
Right. Exactly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There you go.
Exactly. Yeah. So no, they will definitely be building furniture and stuff. But again, it's one way in which I think that we can show some differences, right, and some reminders, right, of the comparative comfort that because it's a constant reminder of the grievance, right, that the people of Fingolfin are, without lots of things that the Feanorians have. There are many comforts that the Feanorians have, because they were able to sail over comfortably on the ships that the people of Fingolfin don't have. So I think it would be fun to include some details like that. And Rhiannon, there should totally be a tent devoted to all the treasure Finrod carried with him across the Helcaraxa. Yeah, Finrod needs like a vault tent, right? Or he needs to bury it all or something. I don't know exactly how he's going to store his treasure, but yes, we need to have like a big hole in the middle of his tent covered by a false floor and a tarp, so that nobody knows all the treasure that is under there. I don't know, but yeah. And by the way, Rhiannon, I've never really been able to picture that. Like, how did he do it? Like, are we supposed to imagine Finrod crossing the Helcaraxa with like a huge chest strapped to his back, like one of the squires in Monty Python and the Holy Grail go around carrying, all full of jewels, right? Or what? Did he have a whole entourage which is carrying like big chests on poles full of treasure? Or I don't know. Yeah, like a huge jumbo backpacks just stuffed with gems. I'm not sure exactly what it means when, in actual practice, what it would have meant. But certainly, in season 3, when we're doing the crossing of the Helcaraxa, we do have to. I think at least one shot of Finrod, like laboring under this enormous backpack that he's carrying, would certainly that kind of has to happen, right? Okay, cool. All right. I like it. I think that this bottom left palisade is really neat. I like that a lot. Again, and I say neat in part because it is in fact neat, right? How everything is planed and smoothed, and you have actual painting and everything on the Palisades. Like even the Palisades are not just going to be rough logs sharpened at the top. These are going to be imposing, well crafted, and beautiful Palisades that they would have. Cool. All right. So next is Amras the Nomad. So this is the issue of Amras's yurt. So here's the question I was going to ask before related to the other. Is the thought here, and I'm asking you guys because Amras living off in a yurt was your idea, not mine. I love it, but I didn't think of it. So the idea is basically, is he still living in the same tent? So are we going to show, is he living in this same yurt in the encampment? And then it's just, he just picks up his yurt and takes it with him and continues to live in that same tent? Or is the yurt that he goes on to live in that we see eventually near the end of season 4, is that going to be an upgrade? Like something, he's having decided to live the dedicatedly nomadic life, he's upped his tent game for his permanent home. What are you guys kind of thinking of it there? So Nick says the same ones. Okay. Right. Rhiannon says when his brothers build fortresses, Amras gets all the tents. All the tents shall be mine. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good. So the idea here then is that Amras is basically literally still living in the same place where he's been ever since his brother died, right?
Exactly. The idea is that Amras has not moved on in any way, and he is not settling in Valeria, and he is not dedicated to this war. He doesn't have any hope for the future. He's very much stuck where he was at the beginning. So,
and he's certainly not participating in the in the Leaguer, right? I mean, he's
right.
Forming no part of the defense in that way.
Right. And we give him the opportunity to speak with Arathel and share his opinions and views, so it's not like he's simply rejecting everything, but right. He's mostly rejecting everything.
Yeah, and I like these. Those are some awesome yurt pictures there, by the way. Some really excellent, colorful, decorations there, and he's the painter, right? So he's going to be there would be plenty of painted canvas among his yurts.
Sure.
Yeah, cool. So would his yurts, would his little tent city be very colorful, or would it be very somber?
I'm okay with it being colorful.
Yeah.
Simply because we want it to be an elvish tent city.
Right. And I mean, although he's, kind of it's not like we have to make him all, Hamlet in his, like he doesn't have to be all goth, or something in his, dark attitude. It's not like he just has to go in for blacks and grays because he's all depressed or something.
I think we should remember that when it comes time to talk about Ale's house. She'll be pinks and blues and greens and things, right?
Yeah, it's all dark on the outside, but once you get inside, it's really lovely. You can't leave, but it's quite nice on the inside.
Colorful.
Yeah.
You can build a summer home there.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like Nick said, Amras isn't Batman. Good point.
Yeah, no, he's not. And Trish, of course, you're absolutely right. We do need to, Amras isn't the dark elf, right?
Right.
And we do need to have there be a clear contrast, even though he is, sort of the downer of the Feanorians and of all the Noldor, really. That doesn't mean that he is, Aol is still in a different category and,
right.
In a different
But, and
space.
also remember, I mean, in Valinor, I mean, we had the Noldor were like jewels and, fancy clothes and all that stuff. I mean, there would still be that tendency,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
here, right? So that should be reflected, I think.
Yeah. No, I definitely.
Gail
I
lives in a
definitely think so.
gingerbread cottage. Rihanna said.
Yeah.
Well, that's a question for season 5.
That's a question for season 5. We won't worry about that quite yet. By exactly what means does Eol tempt Arthel into his house?
Right, she ends up eating like his shingle, right? Like Hansel and Gretel.
Right,
Could do a-
exactly. Yeah, we will.
Nick says no. One word.
We'll get there. Okay. All right. But anyway, this is great. I think that this really works. I really love what you guys did with Amras. Nick says it was Rhiannon's suggestion to have Amras be living the nomadic life here, and I think that's a great idea. Okay. Very good. Dorthonion, the land of pines. Okay. So, yeah, the land of pines, it definitely needs to be fully wooded. So I don't like Scotland here for that reason, for the same reason we were discussing concerning the Scottish Highlands before. You don't really get, it's not as much with the dense forestation. My favorite of these pictures, is the Altai Mountains in Central Asia there, both because we get the nice steep slopes fully wooded, but also some big mountains in the background there that we can plainly see, because we do want that sense of the rising land of Dorthonion with heavily wooded slopes, and then as we look off into the distance, rising until you can see the White Top Mountains down, south of them. I think that's definitely good. I really like this Arizona picture. I would never have guessed that was Arizona. I've been up in northern Arizona, which is where I assume this is, up towards the Grand Canyon region, where you get things like trees and snow and things like that. But I haven't seen that area. So that's really fun. The one thing I do like about some of about that shot there is I want it shouldn't just be mountains, right? Dorthonion shouldn't just be rounded mountains, right? There should be some highlands, some flat land up on top of the rises that you can get up to.
Yeah, finding real places in the world that have all the details is so tough.
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough, even with an unlimited budget. But yeah, these are some great suggestions. And so this Siberia picture, so you're thinking about lots of wooden architecture in Dorthonion. When we're going to the I almost said Emrod and Emros, which is just not at all right, to Agnor and Angrod's places up there, because of course they're completely surrounded by forests. They're going to use a lot of wood in a lot of their architecture, right?
Right. So it's available, so they would use it in the construction. We wanted it to be less heavily defended than some of the other areas, so not a lot of stone towers in there.
Right.
Defenses. And also wood is very flammable. So looking forward
yes,
to the Battle of Sudden Flame, make this go up in flames a lot easier than some other kinds of construction.
Yes. And also I'm thinking back to some of the discussions, some of the scripts from towards the end, in particular the ones where the Fëanorians are kind of talking about how the other Noldor kind of need help and aren't as good as they are at this kind of thing. That would be one interesting example, right? I mean, if they're looking at the wooden fortifications of Agnor and and Angrod, and being like, guys, Really, come on now. We can do better than this, right? Do you guys need help building stone walls? Can we do that, please? That certainly gives some sort of substance to that. Yeah, Nick says that he would think it would drive Mythros nuts. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. I like that, and I think that these images are really neat. These Siberian images, because I in particular like all of the different kinds of sort of decoration and flourish that are being given to the buildings. I mean, we definitely want some really gorgeous and ornate woodwork there. Yeah. Cool. I think it's an excellent idea. And yes, the flammability of Dorthonian does definitely need to be a thing. And then we have Himring, the non-flammable Himring. And Himring is certainly, it's got to be cold, right? We want snow.
The only one of those choices that's unlikely to have snow on it is the one from North Carolina.
Yes.
Because
yes.
the Alaska image doesn't have snow in this particular picture, but I have another picture of it. The entire scenery there is very deep in snow.
Yeah. That one is definitely my favorite one. The Flat Top Mountain there in Alaska. Because, I mean, a nice CGI fortress on top of that would be excellent, right? That would work very, very well.
Or the Italian one. Imagine a fortress on top of that one. Wow.
Yeah, that one does look
With
really
sheer
cool.
cliffs.
I mean, of all of the hills here, that's like the starkest and coolest one, I think. But the landscape around it isn't so good.
Yeah, that's true.
We'd have to Photoshop out a lot of the quaint little Italian villas and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it could
Probably
work.
easier to Photoshop in snow on the, or the Alaska one. Like that's the one you were talking about. So that we could do it with snow.
Yeah, that one we'd have. We'd have. I guess probably the challenge would be not having snow. So I like the idea because having Himring being a place which the primary. Like seeing Himring and standing on the walls, of Mythros' fortress on Himring, it should be the sense that it should give, I would think, would be of like absolutely commanding all of the landscape around it. Nothing can happen here that he is unaware of. And of course, there would be like layers and layers of defensive positions all around that they would be able to man. I mean, you should stand on Himring and look out and be like, yeah, nobody's just going to force an army through here. That isn't going to happen. So I like the idea of Himring being sort of having something like a fortress up on top of that hill. I think would be really pretty awesome. Yes, Nick, of course we could just CGI the whole hill, absolutely. But I really like but it's kind of nicer and easier to use actual terrain. And again, just the way that you've got that, the flat top mountain looking down over the lowlands before it. I mean, I would imagine that we're here, like the left-hand side of the picture would be off towards the north, basically. So that, we're kind of facing, I'm imagining, like I'm orienting myself in Middle Earth here, imagining that we're facing basically east-ish here, seeing the east face of that hill, and the slope down to the north is what it would be overlooking, and so seeing how the land is all falling off in that way, I think that it
clear
would,
that the castle is pointed at Angband.
Yeah, clearly.
I see that. Yes,
definitely. And like you see that other mountain off in the distance there would clearly have a strong tower on it. And there would be, I don't know that there would necessarily have to be whole solid stone walls that would connect them, but very likely they would be. I mean, Mythros certainly would be like, the Noldor most likely to build something like the Great Wall of China, right, over on his side of the Leaguer. So I could certainly imagine quite a bit of stonework going on there. No. So I think that's great. That's definitely my favorite. The Norwegian one is also kind of appealing. The thing that I like about the Norwegian one, down here at the bottom, is that the land around it looks more barren. Right. We've got, a lot of green and a lot of forests there in Alaska, whereas the Norwegian landscape around that hill is just like much more forbidding, which feels so the landscape around feels a little bit more like I've always pictured Himring, very stark, almost desolate.
So you're expecting more tundra?
Yeah, a little bit more tundra. But again, I mean, who am I to say, like, the problem with Alaska, insufficient tundra in Alaska, I'm not going to complain. But anyway, so I don't know that we would want to be going, traveling through lush forest land, right alongside. But then again, like, there does need to be wood around. I mean, that would be handy, even when you're building stone defenses. So either could work, but I'm the hill itself. I'm a big fan of Flat Top Mountain there in Alaska. It's very cool. The North Carolina one is nice, but the hill underneath the little bump on top is a little too gradual for me. I'm not saying it wouldn't be hard to march an army up there. I'm just saying it doesn't have that same, like...
It's not as imposing.
Yeah, it's not as imposing. Like, castle on a crag is more like what I'm thinking of for Himring, and that it really should be, as Nick said, the most unassailable freestanding fortress in Middle-earth. Yeah, exactly. I mean, just one look at Himring and you're like, yeah, no, we're not even going there. Like, that's not going to happen. Yeah. Cool. Very good. Okay. Oh, went the wrong way again. Okay. Keep Hellevorn. All right. So this is Caranthir. So this is a painting by Catherine?
Yes.
Very cool. Okay, so he's going for the castle separated by bridge here, and we've got the lake. So the lake is here being envisioned as more of a not quite a tarn, perhaps, but more of a mountain lake here.
I think she envisioned it being larger off screen, so that this is like a bend of the lake or something, right. An edge to it.
Yeah, this is a wonderful picture. I think this is excellent, and of course, I really like the prominent road. Yeah, I associate Caranthir with roads, right, because of the tolls and everything coming down from the dwarf lands. So, it's just one thing because I associate Caranthir with roads. One of the things that this picture of Keep Hellevorn suggests to me is, like, this is the end of the road. This is where the road ends here. It winds its way up and crosses the gulf out onto that little shoulder of rock over the lake, because it's also that's going to be a place that's going to be gorgeous as well. I mean, like, the views from the castle would be lovely, and yet it's also going to be very, very difficult for anyone to assail between the water and the height. It would be a very difficult fortress to capture. So that is an awesome picture. Many props to Catherine for that one. That is excellent. I had the wonderful privilege of meeting Catherine at Nadermoot last year. Catherine is from Switzerland, and she gave me a wonderful present. She did a beautiful hand-drawn map that she did it's a map of the Swiss walking tour that Tolkien did in the 1920s, the one that inspired so many of the Misty Mountain scenes, as well as some of his original inspirations for the Valley of Rivendell and stuff. So she did this wonderful map of Tolkien's walking tour, which is wonderful. I just love that map. But anyway, wonderful to meet Catherine and great to see some more of her art here. Yeah, cool. Excellent. Keep going the wrong way. Okay, Barad Eithel. Okay, so I'm looking at sort of starting with Hakon's sketch here. And seeing how he is sort of picturing this and looking at the other who made the map on the top left there? Marie, do you know?
I believe it's based on Karen Fonstedt's drawings.
Okay. It's based on Fonstedt.
I don't know. It's only based on. I don't know who actually made it, but it's from the internet.
Right, exactly. Showing the relative positions of Barad Eithel and Minas Tirith there with the Fens of Serech. Okay. Right, so Barad Eithel is, I love the Reichenbach Falls picture. That is like the kind of thing I definitely picture Barad Eithel clinging to the outside of the mountains.
Yeah, that was a conversation that we were having on the message boards as to whether the fortress would be on the mountainside or at the base of the mountain. And so obviously that image is very strongly attached to the mountain.
Yes.
So then if it was up there, the question would be, is there like a city at the base? Or, how does the water work with this and everything? So...
Well, so what I've always pictured with Barad Eithel is, so the function of Barad Eithel is, it's, in one sense, it's not primarily a city. I mean, it's not even exactly in Fingolfin's realm, right? It's like on the outer border of Fingolfin's realm. And I also would think that the whole point of building a defensive position out there, okay, so just backing up a second. When I ask myself, why would you build Barad Eithel? Like, what's the point of Barad Eithel? My answer to that question would be, well, if I were Fingolfin and I were building Barad Eithel, the reason I would want it is I would want it for a staging ground for my troops outwards, right? We have the mountains, but we want to be able to know, like, so if there are armies marching across Ardgallen, we want access out there. So we want a way for our, to be able to post a strong force outside so it can respond more quickly to threats in Ardgallen. And because of course, if you have your whole army, like by Lake Mithrim, for instance, and something in, so say Morgoth decides to move against Himring, right? Which would be a silly thing to do, but imagine that that's happening. Well, by the time you cross your army over the arid Wethrin and get across Ardgallen, it's going to be way too late, right? So you want to be able to have a responsive force on the outside, but at the same time, you don't want to. It would be kind of silly if you are in command of the defensive position of the mountains just to build a fortress out on the plain when you have perfectly good mountains right behind you, without, like, they could just go around or something, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that you would definitely that's why I've always imagined it really perching on the outside of the mountains and overlooking the plain, because you'd also want to take advantage of the opportunity to use the elevation of the mountains to be able to survey from there the widest expanse of Ardgallen that you possibly could. But again, you don't want it way at the very top of the mountains, because again, then you've got a really long descent in order to go anywhere from there. So you have a good standing force in Barad Eithel on the side of the mountain, but fairly easy for them to access Ardgallen from there, so that they can respond quickly and head out there and counterattack and be able to return to safety pretty quickly. Again, if you've got the castle way up at the top of the mountains, or your castle is only inside the mountains, and if they're running away from a foe on Ardgallen, they'll get caught in the passes by the foe potentially. So Anyway, so those are the reasons why I have always pictured Barad Eithel as being on the slopes of the mountains, but relatively, definitely very directly overlooking the plains. That's why I like the Reichenbach Falls. It's a little extreme, the Reichenbach Falls picture there, because it doesn't even look like there's like any kind of convenient road down from there, and I wouldn't want that. Again, you would want a way to march an army in and out. But you don't want to make it easy for an enemy to be able to get in either. I do think that there has got to be some good landscape for this in Iceland. I was just in Iceland with my family back in April of 2019, and that was one of the things that really struck me most about Iceland was the amazing flatland down at the bottom and the massive mountains coming down.
Three of the pictures on this slide are from Iceland.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was recognizing landscapes like this one on the top right here. Looks very Iceland there, and that's exactly the kind of thing that I think that we would want. There's so many. I'm imagining not necessarily again like the Reichenbach Falls with the waterfall coming right out of it, but so many of those awesome cliff sides in Iceland where you've got like the little waterfalls, dropping down 500 feet, there on the side of the cliffs. That's what I would kind of picture Barad Eithel kind of built out from the side of the mountain, and sort of a winding path leading down so that it would be easy to defend. Some bridges that you could cut out after your army had gotten back to make it harder for the enemy to follow them up to the keep, but definitely a really wonderful vista of the plains down below them. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Right. And Rhiannon is pointing out that Barad Eithel is right at the well of the river Syrian. So yes, having a waterfall there would certainly, a significant waterfall there would certainly work. Hakan, hi Hakan, good morning, is reminding me that, of course they have a lot of their horses, which have to be able to access the plain, so that they could have their horses down on the plain. Yes, but there also has to be room inside Barad Eithel for them to retreat with their horses inside Barad Eithel. So absolutely, there can be they can maintain their horses in general down on the plain at the foot of the cliff, but they would definitely need to be able to withdraw inside Barad Eithel, horses and all. As they if they were under attack there. And of course we would also want to emphasize there has to be a path back the other way, right? There needs to be a pass from within Hithlum that would lead to Barad Eithel as well. So if that could be sort of visible up behind, so that Barad Eithel would be one of its other functions would be defending that pass. Like that, this is a way in which you can get into Hithlum, but Barad Eithel is preventing that from being easy for the enemy. But of course, again, it's a good place for people from inside Hithlum, and of course for their army to be able to get through. So, yeah, definitely Iceland. I can't think off the top of my head of a perfect location. I'm kind of imagining when I was in Iceland, I was driving around, as so many people do, down around the southern part. We didn't quite have enough time to do what my sons wanted to do, which was drive around the whole ring road in Iceland. So we didn't get to see the northern half of the island. But there's a whole bunch of different areas. There's like, parts of that, southern, which is all beautiful grasslands below the cliffs. And then there's the part which looks more like, a Martian landscape below the cliffs. Just like miles and miles of gray slag, from the more recent volcanic eruptions and glacier runoff there. But obviously, definitely the the green and lush version is what we would be looking for there. Cool. Yeah, I think it's okay, Hakan, to have a sort of a watchtower part and a settlement part, but I would be careful though, because I don't think it's just a watchtower. I think it would really be a full castle. I think that the majority of the because remember also, even thinking back to our plot, one of our plot points with Anil and his people, right? How the people of Fingon and Fingolfin are very leery of, they're not going to let their guard down on Ardgallen, right? So I wouldn't think we would have a settlement like a large settlement, permanent settlement, elves living outside the walls. Again, they're going to want the pasturage for their horses, so that they would have their like horse ranches spread out at the base of the cliff makes perfect sense to me, because they want to give their horses room to run and they want to take advantage of the grasslands to feed their horses. But I don't think would live down there. They would live in the fortress. I think it really should be more of a, not just a watchtower, but really more of a fortress. And yeah, Brianna and I agree. If there's going to be a separate settlement, it could be right on the other side of the pass, on the western side. We could show that there's more of a purely civilian settlement on the western side of the pass, and you can go across the pass, which, shouldn't be you shouldn't need to be doing rock climbing to get over there. There should be a road, right, by which you can get to the fortress, and the fortress can be primarily military in its focus. But I really don't think there should be a large civilian population living on the plain of Ardgallen, because that seems to convey a somewhat less vigilant sense than I would expect from them. So yeah, if there's a companion piece, that's what I would think. Rihanna and I really like that idea. Yeah, and Hakan, you're right. The Icelandic mountains are nice because they look like real mountains without being extremely high. Yeah, I kept, when we were climbing up, we'd go up a few trails and hike up, and I would feel like, man, we must be like super, super high. And I'm like, altitude of like 700 feet. And I'm like, really? It looks like we're a mile up above, because it's so flat. And then the highlands and the mountains just leap up off the plain. And that, I think, would be just a wonderful effect for Ardgallen and Eredwethrin there. So yeah, that's definitely in favor of Icelandic scenes for Barad Eithel and that whole Ardgallen Eredwethrin situation there. Awesome. So many good things here. All right, Tol Sirion. Okay, so we're looking at the island. So we're thinking about about Minas Tirith itself and about the entire island here.
We decided, for the purposes of the plot, to have a drawbridge on the eastern side of the island.
Okay.
But not on the western side. Okay. So the western shore is pretty much just mountains down to the shoreline.
Right. And
not very accessible. But the eastern shore is more of a plain, and therefore that's what they're defending.
Right. That is, yes, that is the direction that enemies will be much more likely to be coming from. Yeah. Okay. Minas Tirith. So here's what the question that is being pressed upon me by several of these pictures here. How purely military do we want Tol Sirion to be? There's two of these pictures here which are more hang on a second. Okay, sorry about that. That was slightly unexpected. Oh, I'm trying to think.
I thought it was me. I was sitting here looking. I'm going, uh-oh. I think I went away, but it was you that went away.
It was me that went away. Yeah, like my go-to webinar just crashed, which I can't remember when the last
froze.
time was
on my side. It froze. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that was weird.
I thought it was me too, Trish.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. No, that was me. I was like, all of a sudden, like it just cut out, and I'm like, wow. It's. I mean, I've had internet issues before, but I just for the program just to crash. That's unusual. Anyway, sorry about that. Okay. Anyway,
apologies to the editing team.
Apologies to the editing team. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Just taking note of what time in the recording that is that happened, so I can tip them off. Okay. Anyway, so the question I was asking about Tolsirian is how purely military it is, because some of these pictures, I have more like sort of more castle or more cathedral, less castle, right? And I'm wondering, on the one hand, again, we could have Minas Tirith be a little bit more pretty and less practical in some ways, which again would make the Feanorians say, like, dude, do you need help? But then again, I mean, he names it the Tower of Guard, so you'd think it would be primarily military and even if pretty as well.
Yeah, Finrod likes building things, so he's probably going to be practical as well as pretty in his aesthetic, I would assume.
Yeah.
But as you say, this is a Tower of Guard. It should be at least primarily having a military function. It's located in one of the most vulnerable points and therefore a strategic location in all of Beleriand.
Right. And of course Finrod is well aware of that and has signed up for that. So he's, setting out to defend this place. Yeah. But of course at the same time we also know it's going to fall, right? That's going to be fun. That's one of the stories I'm really looking forward to, actually, is the fall of Minas Tirith. But anyway, okay. I am thinking that one of the differences between Minas Tirith and, like, Himring, for instance, is going to be that the primary... Minas Tirith is going to be relying much more on its geography. That is, the fact that the island that it is on is almost inaccessible, right? There will be walls, but I'm not sure I see that one on the bottom left. That's a Ted Naismith, right? Is that a Ted Naismith? No, it's not a Ted Naismith. Is that a John Howe?
I have to imagine it's either John Howe, Alan Lee, or Ted Naismith, but I don't know.
I don't think it's Naismith. It doesn't quite look like Naismith architecture. But in any case, whoever did that one in the bottom left, I don't like it. What I don't like about it is that it's a lot of wall, right? It's a lot of wall. And that's not how I'm picturing this. I'm picturing this as it has walls, but he is going to be relying much more on the fact that on the natural defenses of the island in the middle of the river, on the river itself, and on the so it should be, I think, a fairly, not like the Carrack sticking up out of the river or anything, but like the island in the top left. Where's that?
I don't know. I'm not sure who posted that. Let me
no problem.
check.
but I don't like that island. I mean, it's like the size of the island is a good size, but I don't like the topography of that island. It's too gentle, right? It's got these like, you know, green rolling, you know, well, not fields exactly, lawns, right, sweeping down to the river. I would not want the island to be like that. I like better the topography of the island in the bottom right picture. That looks to me a little bit more like the kind of island that he would be building on here. So a craggier island in the middle, and possibly, you know, with the walls going right down to the edge. But the fortress itself doesn't necessarily have to be like walls within walls within walls. Himring you should look at and say, boy, that that's not going anywhere, right? Nobody could possibly take that fortress is completely impregnable. Okay, so that's an Alan Lee. So I was wrong all the way around. That is an Alan Lee from the Baron and Luthien book. I think that Minas Tirith, instead of looking like a superimposing, you know, concentric defensive structure, should be this bastion on this rocky island that looks almost impossible to get into. But, like, if you could get into it, you could take it. Because, again, I kind of want there to be, again, not for it to look weak, because it shouldn't look weak. It shouldn't be weak. It should be imposing in the sense of, like, it's, again, like, you know, it's got the, you know, the river. This is what I like most about Catherine's picture, the way that the river is running all around it and even through it there. And I like the little waterfall right next to it there. In that, again, just making like another angle from which you could not possibly approach Minas Tirith. So it's very difficult to get to, and you've got its walls, you know, all around it there. But if you got into the island across the river and you got into the walls, then you're almost home free at that point. That's kind of how I'm picturing Minas Tirith. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that relying on the geography of the island and the river should be the point of that. So,
and that's what I dislike about the Alan Lee picture. I mean, it's a beautiful picture, but he has this like huge towers and structures. I mean, the walls are, you know, like 100 feet up above the river and stuff, and I think that's too much. I think it's too much.
Yeah, and obviously there needs to be a bridge.
Yeah.
If we decided it was a drawbridge, then once you take the drawbridge up, it's much harder to get to that island, especially if it's the middle of a rapids section of the river. Exactly.
I mean, it should be that when I say that it's relying mostly upon its geographical position, I mean that his reliance upon that geographical position should be well justified, right? Like he's totally right to trust in the geography of that. But the fortress itself should be less impressive than Himring. Himring should be just like defensive redundancy upon defensive redundancy, like, you know, 4 different levels of like impregnable walls that you could, but if somebody did get inside those 3, there's still another set of walls. Whereas I don't think that's the way that Minas Tirith should be.
Right. So yeah, Himring is more like Helm's Deep that way, in that it's just hard to get to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Good stuff there. All right. Okay, the Gates of Sirion. All right. Yeah, so the Gates of Sirion, of course, where Sirion emerges. Biggest problem with most of these, the non-Ted Naismith images is they're all coming from the top, right?
Yeah, well, in reality, it's difficult to find rivers that actually pop out of cliffside faces like that.
Exactly. This doesn't happen very often.
And when it does, it tends to be a flat river more than a waterfall effect. So
Yes.
the point of the Gates of Sirion was to have it be whitewater, bursting forth from the mountainside kind of thing.
Yes, definitely.
Which required a waterfall image.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think so for the Falls of Sirion themselves. For the Falls of Sirion, I'm thinking something like the High Foss there in Iceland is awesome. The idea that like the falls, they come driving down and then the river just disappears right in the water. Like it's got to be a fairly high fall or else it's not going to do that. Right. I mean, it's not going to force the river into a subterranean course if it's just a gentle little waterfall. Right. So it can't be a mere canyon that leads to that. Yeah, hard to beat Iceland for waterfalls. That was definitely another thing. So yeah, as for the gates, we might have to CGI the gates.
Yeah, I would assume that there'd be artwork involved in one way or another.
Yeah. I mean, basically we would just need a good cliff face and then a good piece of whitewater, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then combine the two.
Yeah. I think we'd have to rely on CGI in order to make the Gates of Sirion look like they're supposed to look.
Either that or a very clever camera angle where you have a canyon and you have a river that comes around the corner, but it looks like it's coming out of the wall of the canyon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like there's probably if you only film it from one angle, a place where you could find that.
Yeah. And this, I like the Chinese waterfall there in the bottom left-hand corner. The only problem is you can see through it to the far side because it doesn't go that far underground, right?
Yeah, maybe not that angle, but that waterfall from a slightly different angle would look like.
Yeah. That's definitely the closest to the idea of the gates. Yeah, the whole idea of the Gates of Sirion it's a little bit peculiar. Like I've never understood like the point of the Falls of Sirion and the Gates of Sirion. Like, why did Tolkien have Sirion go underground for some time and then pop out again? I feel like I've never really understood the function of those, like narratively, mythically. It's such a peculiar, and of course strongly emphasized in his description of Beleriand. He spends some time describing the course of the River Sirion and talking about that. What I'm asking is, it's not that I'm saying I don't know why Tolkien thought of that or how Tolkien thought of that. I'm just saying I don't understand the point of them. I don't understand their function. Maybe someday I will, but I don't understand them right now. Because it never plays a big part really in the
nothing
narrative.
in particular happens there.
Yeah.
Which is what makes it different from, say, the Pools of Ivren, which have a very clear narrative significance. Exactly.
And we get a similar kind of underground way right in the Tuor story as he's going down to Vinyamar, but that's not here, so yeah, it's just it's strange the way that the kind of detail that he gives to this really quite unusual geographical feature of Beleriand, which never really plays a role in the story. As you say, the Pools of Ivrin are very important, and both their narrative and their mythic significance is both much clearer and much more prominent. But anyway, I just a little sidelight. As I say, I feel like I've never really gotten the Gates of Sirion.
We sent Finrod and Turgon on a trip down the River Sirion for their dream event.
Right.
So we do have them at the Gates of Sirion.
Right.
Related to that. So we tried to pull the dream into it. Yeah. But it's true that Tolkien did not set the dream in that location.
Right.
So.
But no, I like that. I mean, we might as well use it as a nice backdrop, right? And it works really well there, right? I mean, the idea of, with, the River Sirion being, sort of a special to Ulmo, right? The place where Ulmo's river bursts forth from the ground is a place which does suggest, mythically suggests itself as a place where their visions emerge, right? And where they're taken by their visions. I like that. But yeah. So by all means, let us create some mythic significance to this. Okay, cool. Brythumbar and Eglarest. So these of course are the havens of Círdan the Shipwright. All right. We've got Harungil's map.
All right. So because there's two separate havens, the hope was that we could differentiate them.
Right.
And having one have maybe significant cliffs and the other one being marked by the protected harbor with the long arm going out to form a bay.
Yeah.
So I think that was Eglarest. I hope it was.
Yes, it is. There's a tiny little label at the bottom.
Okay, yeah. I was like, which one? Yeah. So the idea was that, Eglarest would be flatter visually, and then Brythumbar could have a little bit more cliffside going on.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Of course, I mean, it still has to be... it can be cliffside, but it has to be readily accessible to the sea. I mean, there has to be...
Both of these are harbors, obviously.
Yeah, clearly. So are you imagining Brythumbar like sweeping up into the cliffs, or sort of perched on the cliffs with like paths and stairs down to the harbor below?
I think the idea was that it would be all up and down the cliffside. I don't think the idea was that it would be completely separated from the harbor, because I mean
it's the point, right? I mean,
these elves are very attached to their ships. They wouldn't get very far away from them.
The city is totally secondary to the ships, right? I mean, let's not lose sight of things there. So I absolutely.
So yes, at least easy access via stairs if there is stuff on top of the cliff.
Yeah, which is one of the. I mean, so I'm looking at. I mean, I really like the image of Bonifacio and Corsica there, but that's a little bit too like separated from the water, right? Like the folks who live in those buildings right along the edge of that cliff, though I'm sure they have wonderful views. They'd have to like rappel down to boats, right? And they look like they're much too invested in their houses and too little invested in the ocean beneath. So I would definitely want something to be a little bit more accessible there. But I know you guys were mentioning also that, of course, these are the reconstructed havens of Brythumbar and Eglarest, which were destroyed last season. So they're certainly going to be more defensible. They will have built walls around them to protect them more from the land side, because they were built when they were not anticipating attack at all, really.
Right. So this is the second version of those cities, and it's a different step along.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what would be kind of cool actually for Brithombar is, I mean, Eglarest could be walled with. So like looking at the map there, I mean, if Eglarest is got like cliffs around up behind it, right? So that it's really hard to get at the city from any direction other than there should be like no roads to Eglarest. Like you don't just walk into Eglarest, right? You have to take a boat. It's the only way to get to Eglarest. Because Círdan and his people would totally think that way. I mean, it can be around an inlet river that goes in, so you can sail upriver a ways, and up there, then there's a road, right, that you can get to. So if you're, headed out from there to go up to Doriath, say, there's a means to do it, but there's no street that, there's no road that you can walk all the way into Eglarest. You have to take a boat to get there. And I think that would be pretty cool. Brithombar, what if, like the old city of Brithombar that was destroyed was sort of down on the flats, right? But like up in the hills above it, up on the cliffs above it, they have built their new city on the cliffs in order to make them less accessible. So they're nearby, but they're not just rebuilding on the same spot.
Right, to see a change.
Yeah, to show it. So it's not just a change in like, we're going to rebuild our city, but this time a wall, right? Like, I mean, instead of just doing that, to show them saying like, okay, no, we realize we need to protect ourselves, but they're still, I mean, they're not Fëanorians, like they're not going to be all about like, concentric fortifications. They're going to be about thinking a little bit more cunningly about where they place the havens. The focus is still the havens for the ships, but they want to make sure that you can't just walk into them anymore. But cool. I really, this is my favorite of Harangil's map so far. I really like this Eglarest picture. The way it's divided by the inlet, I think, is really, really cool. And the ability to have what I assume is a lighthouse on this point there, that's really neat.
Yes, that's meant to be a lighthouse.
Yeah.
And a tower. It might be Barad Nimris. I forget if that's where Barad Nimris is. If so, that's what it is. If not, it's just a lighthouse.
Right. No, that's great. I like that a lot. Cool. All right, Vinyamar. So we've got a couple different Vinyamar slides. Yeah, okay. So looking at Harangil's map here, we have he's imagining a city up on several different levels. So there's the point, right, where the coast comes in and then the river curves in, and there's a very hilly place up behind it, and so you've got the city sort of perching up on this point, overlooking the sea and overlooking the river.
Yes. He wanted to incorporate the rocky cliffs into the city, so that the city would be built on and around and in the changing elevation there.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, so it would be like a mini terraced city there. That's very cool. I love this picture of the swallow's nest in the Crimea, but this looks a little too stark. I'm thinking, because I'm thinking Vinyamar, Turgan is going to go. Turgan's city is going to be a little bit less starkly defensive and more pretty, right? That's what I'm...
Right. It's meant to reflect Tyrion in a way that Gondolin will also do.
Yes.
So
yes,
it should look pretty.
It should definitely be pretty. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Let's look at so the other question was the throne room, right?
Right.
So these are different sketches by Catherine here.
Yes, yes. You had requested a throne room that looked out over the sea, and incorporating Carangel's idea of it being built into the cliff. Then the question is, what height in the cliff would the throne room be at? And she's given you a few options there to consider.
Right. Yeah. I'm thinking pretty high. It doesn't have to be the highest point of the city, especially. So, I mean, I guess we could do, going back to the other one for a second, depending on how we did the cliffs, right? You could have the water and then the cliffs rising sharply up and then kind of sloping down, so that as you came around on the riverside, you would see the terraces of the city coming down to the river. But from the ocean side, you would see the steep cliffs and then, you know, Turgon's main fortress up at the top with his throne room balcony sort of looking out over the cliff that goes all the way down to the sea. That would be one way of doing it. The other would be to have it, you know, the sea comes in and there's a cliff, but, you know, then it sort of shelves up from the ocean side, in which case Turgon's, you know, palace would not be the highest point. It would be the first thing there, like on the first terrace, you know, above the cliff facing the ocean. But then you would be able to see the terraces of the city rising up behind it, basically. And I think either one of those would work. I think in either case, the approach to the city should definitely be from the riverside. Like there shouldn't be if you're coming in from the west, right, from the sea, coming straight in at Vinyamar, you should see cliffs and a city up on top, right? And the access points are if you sail around and enter the river. But I don't know. I kind of like the idea of Turgon's palace not being the highest point necessarily in the city in Vinyamar. It's the one that is first, that is right next, that's closest to the sea. He should definitely be. His palace should definitely be the most westerly point of everybody. Like basically Turgon's house is further west than anybody's house in Middle Earth, essentially.
So it's a different way of defining prime real estate here.
Exactly. He's not going to want to be. So yeah, so in that way, actually, I think that having it be on the lower terraces of the city, with the rest of the city rising up behind it, does really kind of convey what he's prioritizing, right? So that, I mean, it's obviously Turgon's palace. It can be the grandest place, and of course, even from a defensive standpoint, it would still be, because you're approaching the city from the other side, so you've got to get through the entire city to get to Turgon's palace. So, you know, it makes perfect sense for him to do it that way too, but yeah, I definitely like the idea. The more I think about it, the more I like it. So there should be cliff, but level of cliff, like I'm thinking from the balcony on the edge of his throne room. So like from this balcony here in this upper right-hand picture of Catherine's there, the drop down to the water would be tens of feet, not hundreds of feet. Like I could imagine maybe like at most 50-foot drop from the balcony down to the water. And the water would be breaking on the rocks in the cliffside down there. Oh, I like this picture of the Merith Atherthad. So we've got lots of little islands. I could see different islands in the river being occupied, right? That would be really cool. If Vinyamar were on this craggy, little promontory up against the sea and where the river comes in, on the other side of the river from the city can be a more gentle slope, right? Can be more gentle land. So I like the idea of the Marath Adderthad being like having all the outdoor fields of the Marath Adderthad set up over there on the other side of the river, and of course the, you know, temporary structures that people are living in for like the long period of time in which the Marath Adderthad is happening would all go up over there. But I like that image of there being lots of little islands in the, you know, in the mouth of the river there, which would get occupied during the Marath Adderthad. I think that's really cool. I like that image a lot. And yes, Elenwe being carved into the mountainside is good. I like that a lot. She's not just a statue which has been brought in like a, you know, as if a large block of marble or something were brought into the throne room and he carves it there, that she's carved out of the mountain, looking out over the sea to the west. Yeah, that's just how I would think there. Yeah. Yeah, good. Hey, excellent. Rhiannon is saying it's just how it works in episodes 9. Turgon is trying to prevent the orcs from getting down to the throne room where Idril is. Yeah, excellent. Good. Glad we're on the same page there. Okay, good. Good.
The upper left image is if you wanted it really lower down, right on the water, you could actually have boats come in. But Catherine did admit that was a less practical choice, and she wouldn't be terribly offended if you didn't go for it.
Yeah, well, tides would mess with that, for one thing. And anyway, I think something a little bit more, if the swallow's nest image is too stark for me, the Venetian version is not quite stark enough, right? I definitely want cliffs and waves breaking on cliffs and rocks, right around Vinyamar there. So yes, the gentle Venetian throne room is a really cool idea. And I am totally not opposed to somebody having a throne room like this. But in fact, I'm not even opposed to the idea of Turgon having a throne room like this. What if his throne room in Vinyamar had water in it, right? I mean, water, of course, is a major thing with Gondolin.
In Gondolin?
Yeah, the whole name of it, right? And we know that there's a lot of water that wells up right there in Tum Laden. What if, some like canals that are made out of the rivers as they well up there on the hill were made into a kind of a water feature thing like this. That would be kind of fun.
So Turgon's going to build the Hanging Gardens of Babylon in his...
Or something. If there's going to be the Hanging Gardens of Babylon somewhere in Beleriand, they'd be in Gondolin, right?
Fair enough. Yeah. I'm sure the Noldor can figure out how to get water to that height.
Yeah,
probably not a problem.
I'm thinking that some of it's gonna. Well, okay, hang on. Advancing to the next slide, since we're already talking about Gondolin, you can see I'm not alone in thinking this. Ted Naismith's Gondolin image, which, by the way, is one of my favorite pieces of Tolkien art. Period. This is one of my favorite. Not only one of my favorite Ted Naismiths. This is one of my favorite of all time. I just absolutely love this Gondolin picture. In fact, that Gondolin picture is my computer desktop image on my screen right there. So I love that picture. And that picture really has always captured for me Gondolin. What I like about that, for instance, I'm really interested in Gondolin here. I love when you look down on it, seeing it a little bit more closely, as we see in this bottom right-hand image. You can see all the green, right? And I really like that. And the expanse of water here is really interesting. But the thing that I like better about, Ted's picture here has more room for agriculture. Like, we can actually support the population of Gondolin by agriculture in the Vale here, which is really cool. But again, you'll notice that Ted here, and also this map on the upper right-hand corner, all have water coming up in the city, right? Like, he's got waterfalls coming down off the sides of
I'm
Gwareth there.
certainly comfortable with artesian wells existing in this
Artesian wells,
location.
yeah, absolutely. There should be several of them. Wells and fountains have to be a thing in Gondolin, right? I mean, that's definitely. But see here, and again, I admit, since this Naismith picture is just one of my all-time favorites, I love his vision of the Palace of Turgon and the tower here in the middle of the city. And what I like here is the difference between the Turgon's palace here in Gondolin and Turgon's palace in Vinyamar, right? There's a little bit of humility in having his palace on one of the lower tiers of the city, right? You know, he's not in that, like, I am the master of all I survey, right? He's not doing that. In Vinyamar, he's looking west across the sea, right? His palace practically has its back to the city, right? Whereas in Gondolin, him being in the center of the city and him now definitely being the highest point in his big tower, right? And he's now looking down on Gondolin and his whole little realm here, right? And it seems to bespeak a change in Turgon's own perspective, right? In Turgon's own mindset, which I think is kind of going in a really fruitful direction for the development of Turgon's character there. It's kind of but it's a pretty understated way of communicating that, right? To just sort of the difference in how his palace is situated in relationship to the rest of the city. Yeah. Okay. Cool. But yes, all of the water in Tumladen doesn't need to emerge from Amon-Gwareth. I mean, certainly some is going to be descending from the other mountains and everything, but I think there really should be artesian wells, so there can be lots of fountains and running water. And when I say canals, I don't mean like the whole thing is navigable by canal in Gondolin, but there should definitely be not only pools of, but like channels of water that people do sometimes, you know, travel on to get from one side of the city to another. You know, they have channeled, you know, so there are artesian wells that, you know, that come, you know, so some of the well springs of some of the rivers of Gondolin come up through Amon-Gwareth and then descend off to the side, and they've shaped them and channeled them and everything so that they make nice, beautiful little canals in parts of the city. I think that'd be really cool. Okay, loving Gondolin. Okay, this is a Harongil map of Gondolin. Right, individual villas with greenery and fountains, absolutely. Absolutely. Not so much like city streets. Exactly.
Exactly. He didn't want to lay it out like a typical city.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But then you've got the higher rings and you've got Turgon's Tower.
Yeah, I was going to say, so we're seeing a flattened, but it's actually 3D. In other words, it's going up, right?
Yeah, we're seeing it from the top, but yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep, and I see that he's imagining several prominent water features and rivers coming off of it as well. So, yep. Cool. Yeah, no, I like that. So there will be sort of paths and streets connecting different, you know, one villa to another. But not like streets and intersections and things lined by houses or whatever. Yeah.
Right, not a very urban feel.
Right, definitely not urban. Yeah. Cool. I like that. All right, the River Narog. I really like that image of the Yangtze River. That, you know, Nargothrond is, you know, it really does need to be in a gorge. But I really like that, you know, a green gorge, right? Not a canyon, exactly. Not a Not just a stone canyon, but yes, a green and growing gorge like that looks like just the thing. One can easily imagine a cave system boring into one of the cliffs off of there. Very cool. I like that a lot. Nice. Okay, the entrance of Nargothrond.
So the image on the left is Tolkien's sketch or drawing, and the concern was that it's not a very secretive entrance the way he drew it.
Yeah.
So, well, nobody wanted to just like ignore that image. There was a desire to maybe rethink the layout of the river or the layout of the entrance or the caves to modify it a little bit. And Rhiannon's suggestion was to create a tunnel for the entrance. So there'd be archways that are more like natural stone, and there'd be trees in front of those archways. So everything's very concealed. But once you go into the tunnel, then you would see the three arched entranceways into Nargothrond.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Excellent. Goodness, can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. Sorry, I see.
Yes.
I'm having my webcam image is hanging up here. All kinds of issues I'm having here. But as long as you can still hear me, I will proceed. Maybe it will catch up with things again here. Okay. Anyway, so here's my thought about like thinking of that Tolkien. I really like this idea of a more natural cave entrance. If we were to take even Tolkien's gates there and move them down from the top of the cliff to into the face of the cliff, I would like it much better. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The idea is that Nargothrond is concealed because they guard the entire area around it, so no one can get anywhere nearby to even see the entrance.
Yes.
But if your whole point is secrecy, why would you put giant doors on top of a cliff?
Right, in plain view from quite a distance away. Yes, exactly. If they were down, if they were down on the face of the cliff along the river, and there is that kind of narrow bank there, right? So it is possible to get there on foot, and not just across the river. And the river's pretty rough there, so it's not really very readily navigable by boat or anything. And the river is winding enough so that you can't see the cliff face that has the doors in it. You wouldn't be able to see from very far up or down the river. You'd have to go down there, and it's possible to go down there on foot, but there's like no reason for you to go down there exactly, you know? If you didn't know it was there, that's kind of the way that I imagine Nargothrond being. Like, if you're standing on the bank of the river next to the entrance, it would be visible, right? But like the cliffs on the other side of the river can also, should also be cliffs that are hard to, that's hard to access the tops of them, so that you couldn't get to the other side of the river and look down at the gates either. So yeah, it should just be, not like concealed exactly, just hard to access.
Right. It's clearly not as secretive as the secret way into Godland.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, but I like Rhiannon's design, the arches and the trees. That's really nice. So it would be clear that there is an opening there. I mean, like, if you did work your way down there, you'd be able to see that there's an opening. But even there, it wouldn't necessarily look like the entrance to an elvish stronghold, exactly. But the idea of then going through a tunnel and then having gates inside, strong gates inside the tunnel, that seems like a very sensible compromise. Excellent. Okay. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our sets and
Locations.
That's the other word I was looking for.
I just want to say everybody did such a lot of work on this. I'm really blown away.
Yeah,
it's really good.
I love the maps. I love this opportunity to kind of picture some of these things more, and everybody did a wonderful job and really helping us do that. Many thanks to everybody who contributed to this. A special thanks to Catherine and Harangil for their maps and drawings, to Rhiannon and Hakan and Marie for all the different the different contributions that you guys have made, pictures that you found, and concepts that you put forward and stuff. Really great work. Thanks, everybody. All right, so next time we're doing music. So our next session is going to be 2 weeks from tonight, Thursday, on January 16th at our normal time, 10 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to be discussing the soundtrack. So go to search YouTube for Philip Menzies, and you'll find his film work, and you can listen to his season 4 tracks in advance, and we'll be discussing them with Philip in our next session in 2 weeks. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you guys again soon. And I will say thanks for listening, and Godspeed. Although the theoretical budget of our hypothetical blockbuster may be unlimited, the production budgets of this and the rest of our fun alternative educational projects are unfortunately not. If you have enjoyed joining our production team, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.